Welcome back to Uncovering Your Inner Power. I'm your host, Jill Ripley, and I'm so grateful you're here today. I would like to discuss the hidden cost of chronic complaining. This isn't about pretending life is perfect or suggesting that we should never express frustration. Life can be incredibly difficult at times. We all experience loss, disappointment, uncertainty, conflict, and heartbreak. There are moments when we need to vent, cry, ask for help, or simply admit that things are hard. That's part of being human. But there's an important distinction I'd like to explore today. There's a difference between processing our experiences and living inside our complaints. Because while occasional complaining is perfectly natural, chronic complaining quietly becomes a way of seeing the world. And over time, it begins shaping not only our thoughts, but our emotions, our relationships, and even our physical well-being. So today, I'd like to explore why that happens, and more importantly, how we can gently shift our mindset without denying the reality of life's challenges. I think we've all experienced this. You have a conversation with someone, and within minutes, they're complaining about traffic, their job, their spouse, their health, the weather, their finances, politics, their neighbors. One complaint flows effortlessly into the next. When the conversation ends, you realize you feel emotionally exhausted. Not because the topics weren't real, but because there was no room for anything else. No curiosity, no gratitude, no hope, just a steady stream of everything that's wrong. I refer to this as the emotional vampire. Before we start thinking about someone else, though, I'd like to invite you to ask yourself a different question. How often do we do the same thing? Maybe not all day, maybe not every conversation, but are there certain stories we repeat so often that they become part of our identity? I always have bad luck. People can't be trusted. Nothing ever works out. I'm just overwhelmed. The world is falling apart. These thoughts may feel true because we've repeated them so many times. But repetition doesn't necessarily make something reality. Sometimes it simply makes it familiar. One of the remarkable things about the human brain is that it becomes efficient at whatever we repeatedly ask it to do. If you decide to buy a blue SUV, suddenly you notice blue SUVs everywhere. They were always there. Your brain simply decided they were important. The same thing happens with our thoughts. If we spend days scanning for problems, disappointments, inconveniences, and everything that's unfair, our brain becomes exceptionally good at finding more of them. It's doing exactly what we've trained it to do. This isn't a character flaw. It's neuroscience. It's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system, the pathways in our brain that strengthen with repetition. The more we complain, the easier complaining becomes. Eventually, we don't even realize we're doing it. Our mind simply defaults to asking, "What's wrong now?" What's fascinating is that complaining doesn't just affect us, it affects everyone around us. Researchers have long understood something called the emotional contagion. Human beings naturally absorb the emotional states of those around them. Think about it. How does someone else's laughter make you smile? Or how a room filled with anxiety can make your own heart race? Our nervous systems are constantly communicating with one another. We are energetic beings, and negative emotions are highly charged. So if someone spends every interaction focused on what's wrong, people often leave feeling heavier than when they arrived. Not because the person is bad, not because they're intentionally negative, but because emotions are surprisingly contagious. The beautiful part is that encouragement is also contagious too. Hope is contagious. Gratitude is contagious. Calm is contagious. The energy we consistently bring into the world tends to ripple outward. Now, I want to make something very clear. I'm not suggesting that we suppress difficult emotions. In fact, I believe the opposite. I always tell people that you must allow feelings to move through you in order to process them fully. Healing requires honesty. If you're grieving, grieve. If you're hurt, acknowledge it. If you're angry, explore why. These emotions deserve compassion, and ignoring pain isn't healing, it's avoidance. But healthy processing eventually asks a different question. What now? What can I learn? What do I need? What action can I take? Complaining, on the other hand, can keep you stuck in the loop of this shouldn't be happening. Why me? Nothing ever changes. One moves us forward, the other keeps us standing in the same place. There's a mindset practice that's often attributed to Warren Buffett that I think is incredibly practical. Whenever something goes wrong, instead of allowing yourself to spiral into frustration or self-pity, try challenging yourself to identify 3 good things connected to the situation. You might begin each statement with, good thing that, or some others may prefer, thank God that. The wording isn't really the important part. What's important is that you're interrupting your brain's natural tendency to dwell on what's wrong and intentionally asking it to look for what is still right. For example, imagine you get a flat tire. Your first reaction might be, this is just my luck. My whole day is ruined. Instead, you pause and say, good thing that I wasn't driving on the highway when it happened. Or good thing that I have a spare tire. Good thing that my phone is charged so I can call for help if I need it. Notice that none of those statements deny the inconvenience. A flat tire is still frustrating, but instead of feeding into the complaint, you're training your mind to recognize that even in a difficult moment, not everything is going wrong. I'll give you a simple example from my own life. It's actually kind of funny. Every once in a while, when I'm making my morning coffee, I forget to put the coffee cup under the spout before I hit the brew button. You'd think I'd learned by now, but apparently not. Every so often, I look over and I realize my coffee is happily pouring all over the countertop instead of into my mug. The last time it happened, I caught myself just as I was about to get frustrated. Then I remembered this practice and decided to give it a try. The first thing I thought was, good thing I noticed it so quickly. The second was, good thing my coffee maker sits right next to the sink so I can simply wipe it into the sink instead of having it run all over the kitchen. And the third thing was, good thing I still have plenty of coffee left to brew another cup. Now, did that magically make me happy that I'd made a mess? Of course not. But it completely changed my emotional experience. Instead of standing there muttering to myself about how absent-minded I was, I cleaned it up, brewed another cup, and went on with my morning. It took maybe an extra minute or two. That's the beauty of this practice. It reminds us that we have a choice. We can spend the next 10 minutes feeding our frustration, or we can spend the next 10 seconds looking for what is still going right. The challenge itself hasn't changed. You've simply changed what your mind is looking for. And that's really the point. When we complain, our brain keeps searching for more evidence that life is unfair. When we intentionally look for what's still good, still possible, or still within our control, we begin training our mind to see the whole picture instead of just the problem. At first, that might sound unrealistic. If something painful happens, the last thing we want to do is search for silver linings. But this isn't about denying reality. It's about training the mind to see the whole picture. Let's say you lose your job. That hurts. It's stressful. It's frightening. But perhaps it could become the opportunity to pursue work that's more aligned with your values. Perhaps you develop resilience you never knew you had. Perhaps it introduces you to people or opportunities that would never have entered your life. None of those possibilities erase the difficulty. They simply remind us that one event can hold more than one truth. Pain and possibility can exist together. I've been thinking about how this has played out in my life so many times. As many of you know, I've experienced seasons of my life filled with trauma, loss, pain, and uncertainty. There have been times when I've spent days replaying worst-case scenarios in my mind, and I would often get stuck in patterns of chronic complaining. But eventually I realized something. Constantly rehearsing disaster wasn't protecting me, it was exhausting me. Instead, I began asking different questions. What can I learn? Who can I connect with? What's within my control today? How might this experience strengthen me? Those questions don't magically solve all my problems, but they change how I experience them. And sometimes that's where our power begins. Recognizing that you have the ability within you to choose where you focus your attention is truly empowering. One of my favorite spiritual teachers, the late Dr. Wayne Dyer, often reminded us that when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. I don't believe that he meant that the external world magically transforms. I think he meant that our relation to it transforms. We stop seeing ourselves as powerless observers. We become active participants in how we experience life. I'd like to offer you a small challenge this week. Every time you catch yourself complaining, pause. Take one slow breath, then ask yourself, is there a chain of 3 good things I can string together from this experience? Maybe you won't have an answer right away. That's okay. The point isn't perfection. The point is practice. You're teaching the brain to search for possibility alongside difficulty. Over time, that changes the questions your mind asks automatically. And those questions shape the experience of your life. I'd also encourage you to become curious about the conversations you have. When someone shares something difficult, resist the urge to immediately match it with your own complaint. Instead, offer empathy. Ask a question. Listen. Or perhaps gently guide the conversation towards hope. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person isn't another story about what's wrong. It's reminding them that they're stronger than the challenge they're facing. As we come to the end of today's episode, I'd like to leave you with this thought. Life will always offer us reasons to complain. There will always be disappointments, uncertainty, and things we wish were different. But life also offers beauty, acts of kindness, unexpected opportunities, moments of laughter, quiet peace, and deep love. The question isn't whether each exists. They do. The question is, which ones are we training our minds to notice most often? Because the stories we repeat becomes the lens through which we experience our lives. And while we may not always control our circumstances, we have far more influence over our perspective than we sometimes realize. That perspective doesn't eliminate pain, but it can keep pain from becoming our permanent address. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you would share it with someone who could use the reminder that hope and hardship can coexist. And if you'd like to continue exploring what it means to live from your inner wisdom instead of your habitual fears, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or join my newsletter so you never miss an episode. Until next time, remember, your greatest power has never been found in controlling everything that happens to you. It's found in choosing who you become in response. Take good care of yourself. I'll see you in the next episode.